What's something dumb you thought as a kid? I was just thinking about this today, actually. I don't know what reminded me, but I'm even a little bit embarrassed today of how dumb I was. While I was like 7 or 8, I was on a competitive swim team. I was pretty bad at it. I got a lot of participation ribbons, I'll put it that way. One day I dove into the water and thought, I should try swimming fast today. So I did, and when I poked my head out of the water, my coach was standing there looking at me wide-eyed. She yelled, "That's a first, you got first place." I won the race, or whatever you call winning at swimming. Anywho, I randomly remembered that years later and it hit me. Like, what was I doing before that? Did it just never occur to me to try to win? What did I think swim meets were for? Just for fun? And why did I never try this new trick of swimming fast again? Man, I was so dumb. Yeah, I guess sometimes you just have to put in the conscious effort of saying, maybe I should actually just try. I mean, honestly, sometimes when I'm making a video, I'm like, maybe I should try to make this an actually good video. That drinking and driving meant any kind of drinking. Well, hey, for some people, they don't even know how to drive even without distractions, so maybe it's best to just not be doing anything else while you're doing that. An island was a giant piece of land floating in the ocean. It'd actually be really crazy if this were true, because that would mean that the ocean could move islands around, and what would most likely happen is that they would eventually just flow onto the shore, and then they would just sort of merge into the continents. So I think Hawaii would probably just end up becoming part of California or something. Or it would land on Mexico and then they would claim it. I had a friend tell me about her sister's birth. She said, her butt was shaved. And for the longest time I thought babies were born with very hairy butts. I didn't realize her mom probably had to be shaved until I was older. I also thought parents would have to have sex regularly during a pregnancy to keep the baby fertilized or it would die. I grew up Catholic. We did not speak of the sex. The whole concept of fertilizing it to keep it alive sounds like it's more complicated, but I feel like that would actually make the world a lot simpler of a place, because it would mostly just mean that people who are in dedicated relationships would be ones having kids. Being fired at work meant you were actually incinerated. Now, I don't remember thinking this, but I do remember thinking that if you ever said you're fired to somebody, no matter who you are or who they are, that automatically means they lose their job. So I always thought like, man, that would be such a jerk thing to do, to just be walking down the street just saying, you're fired to everyone you walk past. Like, that would just ruin lives. I thought Barbara Bush was Eve from the Bible. The news said that she was the first lady, and I didn't know what else that could mean. And she did look pretty old from my perspective. Yeah, it is kind of weird how the first lady keeps changing every few years, too. So the very first person who ever lived keeps becoming a different person, however that works. When I was a little kid and my parents were driving, I would see the car in front of us have these rear blinking lights, and generally speaking, they always lit up pointing in the direction our car would be turning. How did it always know? I didn't understand what they were for, so I thought they were there to give instructions on where to go to the car behind it, meaning us. After all, how did my dad always know which road to take to McDonald's, Toys R Us, etc.? Obviously, he was following the instructions provided by the car in front of us. Hence, I'd always get concerned whenever my dad ignored the instructions the car in front of us was giving with its little blinking rear light. But I figured my dad was just taking a shortcut, because he was my dad and dads know everything. Yeah, okay, if you want to get anywhere, you just have to be stalking somebody at all times. Technically, if you stalk somebody, you're always going to end up somewhere. Escalators would consume me if I didn't step off fast enough. Well, to be fair, if you live in places like China, that is a possibility. I went to a Catholic elementary school. I was giving a presentation in front of my second grade class regarding how God created the heavens, the earth, the mountains. I never really understood how the timeline worked around all that. I just knew the basic bullet points of the creation story. But then I go on some tangent about how, upon the creation of Earth, remember, I didn't understand the timing around it and just winged it, God must have been a big fan of prominent historical figures. George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Jefferson, Roosevelt. My second grade teacher realized what I was about to do, and rescues me from the impending hurricane of ridicule I was about to summon from my peers. She hurriedly separates me from my execution panel, and in the privacy of the hallway, explains to me that Mount Rushmore was not a natural occurrence. Oh, so that's how it happened. Okay, it all makes so much more sense now. My brother is quite a few years older than me, and liked to tell me little fibs all the time. Some of the more memorable ones included him telling me that our uncle invented hamburgers, and that lemonade has a little bit of pig pee in it. When I was younger, I was told that my uncle invented the self-checkout, but that turned out to be a lie. It was actually my great uncle that did that. But apparently he was also kind of a psycho. My parents used to say they worked to make money, so I thought their job was actually just printing money. I remember asking my mom one time, how much do you have to pay to get a job? That I was the only one in the world with actual thoughts and feelings, and everyone else was just part of my reality. Yeah, unfortunately there's lots of adults out there that still think this. That all dogs are male and all cats are female. Well, my cat is female, so I can't disprove this one. I thought the term wind chill factor was wind shield factor. Like the weatherman was letting you know if you needed to scrape your windshield in the morning. Well, hey, those two things probably line up fairly often. When I was like 4 or 5, I used to think that when a toy commercial said, "batteries not included," it meant batteries not required. I'd often use it as a selling point to convince my mom to buy it for me. Mom, it even says batteries not included. Man, I can relate to so many of these. I think there's a lot of similarities to what just most kids just don't understand very well. That people would come in the night and cut off any appendages not covered by blankets. I conveniently convinced myself heads didn't count, because that would be too gross. Yeah, it's kind of weird how exposed you feel, just like having your foot sticking out of the blanket while you're sleeping. It just feels way more uncomfortable than it should. To microwave something, you had to put in a code that corresponded with the time. I was really confused when I found out you just entered the time. Alright, so when you go to the microwave and it says the time is 11:59, and you think, oh, I just want it to be for 1 minute, I'll just put in 12 o'clock. You might end up starting a fire. Adults knew what they were doing. Yeah, once you grow up and you start paying more attention to politics, you find that this is so far from being true. After 9/11, I thought we were going to have to invite Al-Qaeda over to America for the fight. And they were going to invite us over there to fight. And all the civilians would have to hide in basements while the fighting went on. Well, it's kind of like that, except that there's no invitations, people just kind of show up unannounced, and there's not much time for people to go hide. Just kissing a boy or sleeping together in the bed will result in me giving birth in the next month. See, if I were a dad and I had like a 6-year-old daughter who thought this, I'd just be like, yep, that is true, you better not let any boys into your bed. Erasers, made of rubber. Rubber comes from trees, so roots equals rubber. Pencil lead, graphite, can be converted to diamonds under intense heat and pressure. Because of this, I assumed you would never find diamonds in the dirt near trees because the roots' rubber would have erased them. Well, he is learning to use logic. It's kind of going off in a weird direction, but at least he's thinking critically. I thought actors performed the movie every time I put in the VHS tape. So the only time I would ever have to actually like memorize or perform anything was for some like school play. And you know, when you're doing live performances, you have to memorize every single line, and that always just seems so difficult to me. And so when I would watch movies, I would think like, wow, how do they memorize so many lines in like a 2-hour movie? But now I realize that most actors don't really have to memorize any lines. They just kind of yell, what's my line? Like as it's going on. And they just shoot it one scene at a time. Cats ate lasagna. Well, as a cat owner, I can tell you, they will if you give it to them. Man, it's actually kind of awkward to try and implement such tiny responses in these videos. I thought a salad bar was like a candy bar. Like all the ingredients of a salad smashed into a bar that you held in your hand and ate. Well, based on just how crazy some vegans are and how crazy people's diets get, I'm like 99% confident something like this exists. I always thought that after I went to bed, my parents stayed up for hours talking about me. Turns out they were much too tired for that. Well, yeah, they send you to bed early because that's the only way they can get away from you. Not being snarky, but I really believed that the government would always work things out or figure everything out for the greater good. I still remember the look of pity my dad gave me when I said that. He looked at me and I was like, what? And yet people keep begging for more and more government in our lives. Isn't it wonderful? But anyways, that's all for this week of stupid things people said. I guess we can give them a little bit more of a pass because they just don't really know better. These are fairly inexperienced people after all. But I guess I'll see you next time.